Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see some people trickling in, so we'll give it 30 seconds or so. I'll start with the boring part of tonight, which is me talking. It's going to be less than a minute. Don't worry. You'll see these three other lovely faces, which are the stars of tonight's show, and we'll get moving towards them very shortly. So quick introduction, my name is Anna. I work with OzTREKK. I've been here about 4 years. There are many of you, I'm sure, who are familiar with tonight and us and what this whole process is like. Some of you who are not. OzTREKK, we're a Canadian organization. We're based just outside of Ottawa here in Ontario, and we help students throughout the entire process of applying to study in Australia. Medicine is one of our larger programs, and we partner with 13 universities in Australia. We're funded by those universities, so everything we do for you is free, and we have been privileged to work with people like we have here, Nick and Nathan and Emma, who are on the other side of their degree and also within it. So a few housekeeping items. If you do have any questions throughout, we would love to hear them. The point of this evening is put them in the chat on the side there so everyone can see, and we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as possible. If we don't, I'm sure there's going to be a few that we miss. Definitely encourage you to head back to Career Echo. I know many of you have been there chatting to OzTREKK in all the universities, but we'll be there until 9. And as well, reach out to us by email anytime. That's what we're here for. So let's get rolling here. We have Nick with us here, who is a UQMD graduate and is currently completing residency in Northern Queensland. And we have Emma here, who is in Emma's year in your 4th year at Macquarie University. And we've got Nathan, University of Melbourne graduate, or Melbourne, should I say, getting that Australian accent there, who's now back practicing in Canada and is at a lovely cottage-looking place right now after completing Royal College exams. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with all of you for the next 40 minutes or so. To get things started, I want to ask all of you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit more about where you came from, who you are, and where you are now. So let's get started. Maybe Emma, with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to sort of virtually meet you. So yeah, as Anna said, my name's Emma. So I'm currently a fourth and final year student studying at Macquarie Uni, which is based in Sydney, about 20 minutes from the CBD. Little bit about me. So obviously from Canada, about 2 hours northeast of Toronto. So Peterborough, if anybody knows that, or Peterborough, if I want to sound like a local here. And then I came through OzTREKK in 2019 to Macquarie. I picked Macquarie for its global health aspect. So we're meant to spend half of our 3rd year in India. Obviously, because of COVID, that didn't happen, but that's okay. I've been loving time in Sydney and sort of enjoying my time here, even though I didn't get every aspect of the program that I wanted. Looking forward to residency and internship here, hopefully. That would be sort of my next step. So kind of following in what sounds like Nick's footsteps.
Fantastic. And that leads right into you, Nick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick. I am from Calgary. I came over in 2017 and started my degree at UQ and finished it a year and a half ago. I am fresh out of internship, and I am currently in the intensive care unit.
Okay. And Nick, just where are you from in Canada again? Did I just miss that? You may have just said that, but
Calgary.
And Nathan.
Hi, everyone. I'm a little older than these guys, I think. So I think it's been like 10 years since I was also sitting in one of these meetings. So it's been much longer than I realized. I am Nathan. I'm from outside Vancouver, Surrey, Langley area. And I went to UQ, actually not Melbourne, but I finished there and came directly back to the 5-year merge program at U of T. So I'm in my 5th year. And I am just finishing that. As Anna mentioned, I just finished Royal College in a little space here right now, but it feels good to have it behind me. And I have taken a staff job for next year at Toronto General, and will be concurrently doing a master's in QA at the same time. So the school never ends, just never ends.
So you signed up for it, Nathan? Perfect. So maybe just jumping back to start to you, Emma, can you just tell us a little bit more about choosing medicine as a pathway and at what point you started looking at Australia as a study destination?
Cool. So I think I have probably a not necessarily the most common, but a typical experience of students applying to Australia. I was a bit of a late bloomer into medicine. I didn't start my undergrad thinking, oh yes, I need to be a doctor, I need to go into medicine. I kind of was in biological science. I knew I liked human biology best. I liked helping people and sort of filtered my way through, kind of realizing maybe medicine is something I want to do sort of towards the end of second year, beginning of third year, which means I was a little bit sort of behind the mark for applying in Canadian medical schools. So we've all been through sort of the OMSAS process in Ontario. It can be quite a little bit cutthroat at the first cut of your GPA and scores and things. And I had a bit of a rough transition in first year. So my GPA was kind of brought down from that. So I did apply I took the MCAT at the very beginning. So like the first weekend of my fourth year was the last chance I could take it. And I did apply and I received a rejection in January and started sort of scrambling, thinking, okay, what do I do with a bachelor's of science in biology, wanting to get into healthcare? Started Googling rapidly, came up across Masters of Public Health. So I did do that through Brock University before coming here, and also stumbled upon OzTREKK. So it's kind of a beautiful happenstance. Started looking at international medical schools and thinking, maybe if after my master's, I still want to go into medicine, which is what happened. I did my master's and the entire time thinking this will just make me a better and stronger doctor, someone who can care for people better. So I knew that that was still the path I wanted to take. And I started looking abroad. And a few criteria for me were I had to be comfortable living and working in that place for at least a few years after the degree, recognizing that coming back isn't always just an instantaneous thing. Also because you make professional and personal connections here and you may want to stay here. So that kind of took the United States out, which I know is often like a path that people go, but I personally didn't want to work in the healthcare system in the United States. So I kind of crossed that one off. Secondly, I knew I'd be taking a loan, so I would like something where the dollars were kind of similar. So that kind of took the UK and European schools out. And that left Australia, and OzTREKK was here. They were super friendly. It was free to apply to most of the schools that I applied to, and my MCAT score was expiring. So I kind of said, why not? Throw my hat in the ring, see what happens. Worst case, I get accepted and have to make a decision, right? Like, that's not that big of a deal. And I ended up interviewing at a few schools, getting accepted to a few schools, and falling in love with Macquarie at the same time. Sort of beautiful serendipity, I think. If I had gotten into med school the first year that I had applied, the Macquarie MD didn't exist yet. And on paper and in practice, the Macquarie MD has been exactly what I want from a medical school. So I kind of like to think it kind of happened for a reason. So I ended up, once I got the acceptance, had to go, oh, I guess I'm actually going to Australia. Came for the adventure for the school specifically, and knowing that it's a really well-respected MD program, I can bring it back home if that's what I decide to do. If not, if I decide to stay here, the healthcare system is very similar to what it is in Canada, what I'm used to, sort of the level of care and the level of sort of financial ability of patients and things like that. So it all lined up morally, and it made me excited. And so I ended up here, but it technically wasn't my first choice. I technically got here through a road of sort of failure, if you will. But I think it's actually ended up better than I could have thought of if I had stayed at home.
Emma, I love listening to you speak. It's just such a pleasure the way that you articulate yourself. But yeah, no, a lot of insight there. I think it's up on our Career Echo, a great video of you speaking about your process of choosing Macquarie and heading into medicine as well. Just jumping to you, Nathan, I know that throughout your time at Melbourne, you were looking at beyond looking at coming back to Canada, also at the US pathway as well. Can you speak a bit more to your experience at Melbourne, and also, what you were doing throughout to prepare for where you are now?
Yeah, and I was at UQ too. I can't speak to Melbourne, but UQ is better anyway.
Sorry. Oh my gosh, UQ.
Way better. I've heard amazing things about Melbourne, but I will happily 100% throw my weight behind UQ being a fantastic place. It's not cold, it's beautiful, it's subtropical, I come from Vancouver, so like I didn't need a rain and cold in the winter. I needed just nice, wonderful Queensland weather, which was fantastic, and the thing I missed most for sure, as I'm still snowing outside of Toronto here.
For my sake, just pretend. Can you just pretend you went to Melbourne?
I can't speak to it too much, I guess. So I came over pretty much. I mean, it is very competitive to try and come back, especially straight out. I think most people know that. I come from an emergency nursing background, so I already knew that I was kind of interested in emergency medicine and that end of things. Coming UQ, the nice thing that I found is there's a double cohort with the states there. So there's a lot of people who are from the US there, which is, as Emma kind of mentioned, it is a way back, and I was looking to apply there. I did a rotation through New Orleans for a few months doing critical care there, which is fantastic. But with that, it did kind of help drive me forward with a couple other people who are close friends that I met at UQ. And it is a process that starts in year one. You start trying to get rotations back. Obviously, it's been difficult with COVID, but you start prepping. Like I did the USMLEs just because it really helped me study North American medicine in addition to, and it helped me practice for Australian as well. So I did both of the steps. I think some of those don't even exist anymore, as well as some of the Canadian exams as well. So for me, it was just really kind of determination in terms of you kind of have, it's more expensive. You have to travel back and forth more. You kind of have to try and get those rotations set up. I was very fortunate coming from a nursing background to have ties to a hospital where I was able to get rotations. But there's lots of opportunities, lots of options. And it was, I kind of focused on both the scores and from those exams, as well as rotations through to try and build that kind of initial coming back, which is a bit different to Australia, where you kind of come out of med school and then you get to be an intern and rotate through things and start to build an application to a residency program. So I'm sure Nick can speak to a bit more, but if you're planning to come straight back without doing anything in Australia, you have to really build your profile ahead of time, which is good and bad. I knew I wanted to do emergency medicine, so it made sense for me to be building that profile. But if you're someone who doesn't, if you go through med school and you're not too sure what you want to do yet, the fantastic thing is you can stay and rotate through internships and find that out and build that practice, and then apply to come back at a different time.
And so I'm just thinking, Nick, can you add on to that a little bit? Your experience at UQ and looking at the decision of staying on for an internship in Australia.
So I completely agree with everything said about UQ there. That is verbatim what happened a couple years later. I have a slightly divergent path there, where I was initially going home trying to go home immediately after med school. First, the interest was heme, and then GP, and then ED, and then I slowly found my way around back to ICU. So it's been a little bit of a traveled path, but completely agree that the prep starts from day one, trying to get back home if that's the resume you're going to build. But I've decided to stay just because I like the training pathway here, and that ICU has its own college here. So it's kind of a 2-for-1. Internship was awesome and fantastic, and at some points annoying if you're in rotations that you don't particularly interested in, but it just reaffirms that you don't want to do them. So mine was intensive care, 2 blocks of orthopedics, ED, and gen med. So 2 of those were much better than the other 2, and I'll let you guess which 2 are my favorite out of them. But it's a perfectly viable program. Not for nothing, but I did complete my Canada license as well. So whenever I'm done here, I do have that option of going home. I just need college equivalency. But there's a lot you can do once you're a consultant or attending.
And listening to the both of you, Nathan, Nick, speak about from day one, there's a lot going on. You've got your degree, and you're also thinking about what comes next, right, after your degree. And there's already a question here, actually, just in the chat about balance, like finding a work-life balance throughout your degree. Maybe, and you might all have some insight on this. Maybe Emma, if you want to just start with some insight there.
Cool. I think it's very, very possible. I think it's about sort of prioritizing yourself and your own needs as equal to the other thing. So I always describe it, I'm involved with a lot of student groups, and I always describe to students when they're taking on a role or something, that they need to put themselves, like their well-being, making sure they're happy, healthy, and well first, and then their school, and then the student group that they're in. So if at any point you're not well, then you can step back from the student group. At any point your grades are suffering, then you step back from the student group. But I always put myself and encourage other students to put happy, healthy, well first. And I do find, I think in part because of the way the internship is structured I almost said at Macquarie, but in Australia in general, your first year, you are, as Nick sort of alluded to, you are rotating around, you are quite general, you're learning what it's like to be a doctor in sort of a well, sort of usually protected team. So you are the junior member of the team, but you have levels above you making decisions and things. So that means during our study, unlike the North American degrees, where by fourth year, you're essentially treated as an intern, you're essentially doing your intern year then, we have a little bit more space to breathe, I find, at least comparing to my friends who are studying in the US and Canada. So it's definitely possible. Australians are laid back people. If you take a Canadian and give a summer year round, you found an Aussie. So they encourage you to, once you're a student, if there's nothing happening on the wards, they say, go home, go to the beach, go relax. So I do think it's really possible. It's just about knowing what you need to be happy, healthy, and well, and how you can schedule that into your week. So if that means you take Sundays off to do fun things with friends and relax, then you need to prioritize throughout the rest of the week to make that happen. And I think first year is a really good time to start experimenting with sort of, am I someone who needs a bit of time off every day or time off every week? Like, how does that look for me? But I think life as a doctor is probably a little bit different to that. Students are blessed with flexibility. So maybe Nick and Nathan can speak to that a bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. You mentioned there too, and I know this is probably not where most of the questions are going to come, but you know, those Sundays at the beach or your enjoyment during your time in Australia. Just quick, just to jump on that, I don't know if Nathan or Nick, you have any insight into just life in Australia during your degrees, or anything that you particularly enjoyed or loved outside of school?
Been a hot minute since I was there, but I mean, it's a good place. Again, forget Melbourne, like Queensland's pretty fun. It was, yeah, it's great. Like, I like everything I was saying is exactly correct. Or, you know, in terms of, you have to find this balance. You do have to work and you need to prioritize work, but you also need to prioritize wellness, because that will make you better. Hammering through stuff means it's definitely a marathon in medicine. Getting through med school, like my residency in emergency medicine, is longer than the entirety of my med school. So with way more shifts and way more hours put in. So it is absolutely a marathon, and wellness is something you need to take seriously for sure. So that is going out and having fun. Brisbane was really like booming around the time that I started. It went from a sleepy little city when I kind of went there in first year and really started to take off. And it's nice year round. You can walk. I mean, I'm wearing a sweater because this is like a formal event. I'm usually the guy that'll be outside in the winter in you know, sandals and a t-shirt. So the fact that I can walk around in that all year pretty much in Brisbane was really nice. There's lots of different aspects to Brisbane. I did a lot of running and a lot of boxing. And then you just take the train out to the coast every weekend, and you know, Surfers Paradise is right there. It's a 45-minute train out of the city. So it's a very nice place to be able to relax. And you know, those are really, really fun aspects to it. And the community is really fun. And exactly like Emma said, Australians are super rad, super amazing. I love coming back to the Canadian system. Like, you get hammered hard here and you're essentially, you know, there's a lot of things I think they could learn from the Australian system in terms of supporting students and supporting learning, as opposed to just, you know, using them as an accessory, if that makes sense. So I loved Australia. I made me a way better doctor, I think, than if I'd actually studied in Canada. So I highly recommend it, to be honest. And you know, but there's lots of fun stuff to do. I'm sure Nick has all sorts of awful stuff. You can do quite a bit with very, very little there to get to whatever beach is close by. And that was easily the best part, especially from Calgary when it's -40, when it shouldn't be. Yeah, and the university just puts so much stuff on that's just non-medical,
and the cohorts are really tight as well, especially in those first 2 years. And then our American colleagues go to Louisiana, but you're never short of things to do. I think the marathon is probably the best way to put it. It is incredibly challenging to find the work-life balance, especially if you're trying to go home, because you do need to work on that resume and the application and getting the papers and rotations and every point on the CARMS application in the end will really challenge your time management. But you do get better at it. The first year is probably the hardest, and then you slowly find your groove and find what parts you actually need to focus on.
Yeah, no, amazing. Let's jump into some nitty gritty here, because we've already got the questions rolling in, which I expected. Just, jumping back to this topic of returning to Canada, and Nathan, this is probably going to lean a bit more towards you. Do you have some insight on preparing and specifically securing rotations back in Canada throughout your degree?
Yeah, so things have changed a bit in the last 2 years, obviously even before COVID, as far as that goes. And a lot of people who've gone through OzTREKK US to Australia that I've kept in touch with and helped kind of arrange rotations coming back. Everything now is becoming much more standardized in Canada to try and keep it as fair as possible, which I think is a good thing, but it can make it a little bit difficult. I will say, if you're coming from Australia, I know you're going to want rotations in the cities you're from and the cities you're wanting to go to, and that is ideal. Everything is pretty standardized now, so it's all through online portals. It's all through online portals. You can get in contact, like if you want to come to Toronto, U of T go to the U of T website, visit the med students, elective med students. It's all the information is there. You can type to them, figure out with them, and some of them will direct you to the portal. Sometimes you can work out stuff through that. So you do have to do a little bit of digging as far as it goes, but almost all, especially the major medical schools, will have ways to arrange those rotations. Even if you can't get a rotation where you want or the time frame you want, which I found very difficult. Like I never managed to get a rotation in Toronto. I did all mine out in Surrey, outside Vancouver, and I did them in the States. Just showing that you're trying to get as much diversity as possible and taking rotations where you can get them in the specialties you want goes a long way for them. They understand the process, and they're becoming even better and better every year in understanding what it takes for international students to work hard to come back. So, there's lots of options available, and it'll be different to what you'll hear from what the Canadian students are doing, just because it's a lot more difficult, but they understand that in the application process. In terms of kind of working to get those things, yeah, it's just touching base. There's almost always a portal you can go through. And then again, making sure that you are still being a good doctor and you're willing to learn, and your attitude matters a lot in the way you kind of go about those things. And I'm sure Emma and Nick are the same, in that you just want to learn a lot and study hard, but enjoy life, and that'll get you a long ways of getting those rotations back.
You mentioned earlier that going to Australia made you a better doctor. I've done multiple rotations in Canada, and despite staying here, it definitely made me a better doctor to C2 systems. So even if you're not trying to match, I would very well worth it. My time in ICU in Vancouver was outstanding. And it's really, really helped later on too.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, on a similar but different path to that, Nick, there's been a few questions about your registration for a Canadian license as well while you're practicing in Australia. Can you elaborate a bit more on what that looks like and what you've done to get that?
It's changed recently because of COVID. They've dropped one of the exams. So now it's the MCC QE1, which is a written exam, a full day exam, and then 12 months of postgraduate work. That you just have to prove you've done, and it doesn't really matter where, as long as it's accredited by some governing body in that country. So it's really just paperwork and an exam at one point for the license. But the trick is getting the college equivalency when you're done, because you do need them to recognize that as well. Not sure. I'm pretty sure it's weighted heavily, but I'm not at the end of my training yet, so I'll leave that for another day. Was it just Canada licensing or Australian as well?
Canadian, but if you'd like to touch on Australian, that would also be fantastic.
It's even easier. All you have to do is complete internship, and it takes 12 months, and that is it. very, very simply put. There's more details to it, but that's a future problem. Just 12 months of work.
In terms of these rotations, and again, Nick, you mentioned the one that you did in Vancouver, and Nathan as well, you spoke to the process. Timelines for starting to look at setting up those rotations. Do you recall when you started organizing those?
Every place is a bit different. Lots of these are like individual websites. So if you know you're wanting to go to a specific place, a specific program or city, then you should look that up. Most won't let you apply outside 6 months. That being said, you can always send friendly emails. They usually are understanding in terms of like, hey, I'm just trying to get the process. I'm coming from Australia. Things take a bit to get moving. Most places, it's about 6 months. But the earlier you get on it, honestly, the better in terms of understanding information, because it's much easier to get a rotation set up in Canada and then ask most of your Australian universities to make a switch to make that happen, which is what I did. And I find that was pretty useful. Also, like, it's supposed to be the fun time, but the year in Australia runs January to November. So I would often, the way I got most of my rotations in was actually doing an extra rotation, which sucks. I'm really sorry, but like most places will constitute 3 to 4 weeks as like a rotation. So you can get in those sneaky, it's not padding the resume, you're getting experience, but without having to do the full like 8-week blocks that a lot of Australian universities do. So I would fly home. It's less fun, you don't get to celebrate all your friends at the end of the year, but I would fly home from Brisbane for the end of November. I would do a packed 3-week. I would do 4 weeks of shifts in 3 weeks, and then I would have Christmas break with family. But that is a way if you're having tough time getting rotations that fit within your schedule in Australia. That's like a nice way to get at least a rotation a year done.
Yeah, perfect. We just we have a late addition here, Brianna. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
I know you.
Yes, sorry about that. My class ran overtime, so just rushing in.
No, that's perfect. Quick intro to everyone. Brianna you're in your third year at Deakin. I've already made one mistake this evening with university, so let's get the year right.
Yes, you've got it. Yeah, third year university, third year Deakin University, and then I'm at their Warrnambool campus right now.
Amazing. So I'm just going to pick up again where we're kind of at with these questions, but there's been a few more, and maybe Emma, I'll direct this to you, and Brianna, if you want to chip in because you're currently still in your studies. Have you found that there are supports available or other Canadians who you've been able to look to for support in looking at just what we're talking about, options after graduation, if you're looking to study for the NAC-OSCE or things like that while you're in your degree?
Brianna, do you want to go first? I've already talked quite a little bit, so maybe we'll hear you first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. There's like lots of people within my own like cohort that are Canadians, and kind of like chatting amongst the fourth years, kind of what their plans are for the future. We have also got a student-led initiative for Australia of international students, and so that's been really invaluable. I think Emma's actually part of it as well, to kind of get information on how to best apply back. The other thing that's been really helpful is I've got quite a few friends at other universities that I've met through OzTREKK, as we've all applied through the same stream. And so when we're in the Gold Coast, or if we were in Sydney, I've actually met up with people who are doing it, and they have kind of their journey through it as well. Before doing this, I'd also got connected with someone who had worked in or trained in Australia and was working in Canada. So I had actually reached out to him to see what his process was like and how easy or hard he found it. The one great thing, and I'm sure you guys have found now, most of us are really excited to share our experience and like help each other through it. So I've never found not a friendly face to answer questions to.
Yeah, I would just echo the same. So it seems daunting at first. I think some of the smaller unis, you'll have a smaller cohort of international students. So I'm at a particularly not disadvantage, but I'm the second cohort to go through my uni. So the first cohort only had 2 international students and they weren't Canadian. My cohort has 7 and 6 of them are Canadian. And like it's expanding sort of past that. So there are still, even if you're med school, you don't find another Canadian maybe at your particular school or in your group and you're finding it hard to connect to them, there is the AMSA International Student Network, through which you can find other international students. They focus on helping us stay in Australia, but you can connect with Canadians and North American students through there, which then you can find study groups and things. But I think it is, if you ask around, I mean, Canadians, we all know we're friendly and we all know that we're going through this sort of together. And I wrote in the chat earlier, if you connect with your med stock, there's usually like an international student rep or international student group. You can connect there. Great to just meet people and also kind of hear those long vowels sometimes. It's kind of nice. I'm enjoying the accents right now. But also sort of create a study group and a plan and connect with alumni from specifically your uni that have gone back, or sort of upper year students who've already arranged some of those pathways. I think, yeah, Macquarie, we're doing a good job trying to mentor the people after us, but there wasn't anybody ahead of us, but we're still willing to put in the work to try to help them out. And you'll always find, if there's other people going on the same journey, that they're willing to share their experience and what they can do.
Yeah, UQ, we had people in the years ahead, usually whether came back or would do it online, or there's different ways to do it as well, but they usually have people in the year ahead who will pass that information down on the years after. At least that's how it was done when I was at UQ. I'm not sure if Nick knows further what it's doing now.
That is a very time-honored tradition at UQ, and I assure you it is still going strong.
I was going to say, I think a really nice kind of testament to the support out there is even just, this evening, we've got people who are in deep in their, 3rd and 4th years of your medical degrees. We've got 2 practicing doctors and you're here really genuinely wanting to speak to all of these students here. So, and it's not just, I mean, you all are very special people, but there's lots of you, and it's amazing to see from an outsider's perspective as well. Nick, just jumping back in here, can you speak a little bit more to what happens after internship in Australia?
So the pathway in Australia is, as soon as you finish residence or as soon as you finish internship, it becomes a very bridged pathway depending on what type of medicine or surgery you want to do. But generally, you start as an intern for a year, and then you're a resident for 1 to 2 years, and then you become a principal house officer shortly after. And then after that, you become a registrar, which is somebody training on the program. But you can be a PHO for any number of years before you get onto the program. And typically, the more competitive it is, the longer you're going to wait to get on. So the surgical ones, and especially orthopedics and ophthalmology, are particularly grueling to get on. And you do have to play the game a little bit in terms of points, just like you would in the Canadian applications. But other things are very, very quick. So psychiatry is very quick and family medicine is very quick. ED has gotten a little bit longer, but nothing that shouldn't be a deal breaker. And depending on where you actually practice, sometimes at the rural sites, they call you up early to do more advanced things just because they need manpower. So it's a great learning opportunity if you're very type A.
Again, with this Australian pathway, and anyone welcome to jump in here, Brianna or Emma as well. I'll direct it at you, Nick. In terms of securing an internship, just based on your knowledge, there's a question here about, internship hierarchies and number of positions for international versus domestic students. What are your thoughts on this? What are your experiences with yourself or people that you know, things that you've heard?
From my cohort, the cohort that just started their internship 5-ish weeks ago, I don't know of anybody who didn't get a job. Getting an internship is a little bit more of a slug compared to having a resident job, because the intern jobs are funded by the government and the resident jobs are funded by the hospital. And they each dictate how many people they actually need to staff that. And typically the resident numbers are more than the intern numbers. So there is a plethora of jobs. As soon as you finish your internship, it's just tricky getting that first one. Realistically, if internationals, we go regional for internship, just because that's where the domestic students don't want their internships, and couldn't tell you why, because it is the absolute best place to do it. Without a doubt, they will give you what you want in terms of rotations, and they will treat you very, very well. All you have to do is show at least a little bit of loyalty to these sites. So I didn't bat an eye when the application came around this year. I said, are you going to hire me next year? And they said, yeah, I guess so. And that was it. It's just getting that internship. It's a little stressful, and there's tricks to it. And aside from like trying to actually make a good resume, you don't have to try as hard as you would with the Canadian system, but you do need to show that you are going to add something to the hospital, and it should be okay.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I obviously didn't do this, but having the vast majority of my friends, 99% of the people I was there with, was ended up kind of in the system outside of Queensland, and it's very much the same. Some people want to stay in the city, some people went rural. The overarching thing though is that everyone, there's benefits to both things. If you go rural, you're not going to be able to go to like the high fancy restaurant down the road, but you're going to get way more applicable experience and far less scut work. You're going to get to do everything. You're going to get fantastic experiences, and you're going to get really amazing communities. And also, like, rural Australia is still super dope. It's awesome. So that was going to be my plan, to actually leave Brisbane and also get out, because the experiences that you hear kind of there are fantastic and great teaching. That being said, also, if you want to stay in a big city, there's all the benefits to that as well. It's the same thing as coming to your residency in Toronto versus Saskatoon. Like, there are always benefits and detriments no matter where you go. It's kind of how you apply yourself and what you're willing to put into your learning. When you're a med student, you will go through have the option to go rural through, at least in Queensland. And those are some of the best rotations you'll have, because you're not walking around or delivering x-ray forms. If things are busy, you're really a part of the team and getting super involved with people who are invested in your learning. And, you know, that's the same for Canada. That's the same for the States. It's the same for Australia. It's just how you kind of approach it, the attitude you have. So you can make a fantastic learning experience out of anything, especially in the places outside the big cities in Australia.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to chime in as someone sort of looking down this pathway and figuring out what I'm doing next year. So every state is a little bit different in Australia. So you do have to sort of, once you settle on what school, you can look at sort of your options. So New South Wales has a few different things. To get in the city, you just put a preference in, and they go through and they give the locally educated local students the spots first, and then they kind of go through, and we are category 3. So we're internationally born, but locally educated. So we're kind of the third group of students that gets looked at. But that's just done based off of trying to get people the most number of people their highest preference. So it's the match. It uses the same algorithm apparently as the States. If you actually look at it, it's the same branding. So that doesn't require CV building and such. It's just we're looked at sort of lower on the list. So people do what's called, like, they be a little bit smart with what they preference. And that means they're usually preferencing the city hospitals that are a little bit underserved and a little bit more external. So like in Sydney specifically, that's sort of like the west sort of hospitals that are really busy, really under the pump, and the local students don't really want to go to. Then there's your rural pathway, which is similar to what Nick and Nathan were just describing, and that requires individual applications to, well, you go through a system. It's like applying to med school. You go through a system, but you're applying to the hospital specifically. And that has a little bit more CV component and interview component, where you can really shine and demonstrate that you're keen to learn from the rural population. I'm personally from a more rural place in Canada, so I'm kind of leveraging that of being like, this will feel more like home than the big city, and I'm excited to learn here. And then the third thing, Michelle specifically, you asked me to clarify, is there's the junior doctor training program throughout. I know there's hospitals in Queensland and New South Wales, but I think there's a couple other, and that's training through the private system. Pros and cons to that, but they do preference the internationally born, locally educated students in preference group 1 for that. And that's the sort of Australian government, or like the healthcare system, trying to accommodate these students that are being educated. So they recognize that there's a small number of people not matching, and they're trying to give them another pathway. And it's staffing their private hospitals. So in a private hospital system, going to be a bit different. Usually it's a bit slower pace. So lots of learning opportunities. You're learning more one-on-one with the consultants, because they're a bit more hands-on at the patient's bedside. But it is a bit of a slower pace, and it's going to be more niche than, you're not really going to have your gen med kind of thing. So pros and cons to all of them. I'm going to be going through all of the pathways, because as an international student, you just kind of ask everyone for a job and you accept the job you get. And then you do your internship and residency. And as both Nick and Nathan have said, you make the most of every experience that you have, and that's totally possible to do no matter where you get placed. And then you start to look at, am I going home after this, or am I going for a set job or a registrar's job, as sort of Nick described earlier. So that's New South Wales. Victoria is somewhat similar. They're slowly going away from application-based things, and it's going into more of a match system like New South Wales as well. I don't know about Southern, Western, or ACT though.
Yeah, I can kind of talk a little bit about Victoria. So kind of as Emma was describing, that tier, so she's a category 3. So in Victoria, as a locally trained international student, I'm actually a category 2 for being matched into a program. And they are phasing out the old system that we had, which we tied to a Z score, it was called. We had like this big test that everyone would write, you'd get a score, and then it would basically tell you kind of where you could apply, very similar to a US model in that regard. Now they've gotten rid of that exam completely, and they're going a bit more to that New South Wales matching style. The only difference that we have is they do a rural match first, and then they do a metro match. So if you want to go rural, you'll try to go through that stream first. They'll let you know right away, and then they'll go back and kind of go through whoever hasn't been matched, then they can go through the metro match and see if they go there. The point that they want to do is they really want to merge more of us to go rural and remote, which like honestly is the best. Like you get to do so much. So my clinical school is in Warrnambool, so that's 3 hours west of Melbourne. It's still like 35,000 people. We service a catchment of 100,000 people, but it is just so amazing, the community that you get. They literally will let you do anything. I actually just finished a rotation in Darwin. So Darwin is considered rural as well, even though it's a city. Incredible. Like I cannot wait to go work there one day. It has been absolutely amazing. I got to, as a 3rd-year student, I was like fully scrubbed into surgeries. I got to admit patients from ED. I got to take histories. So you get to do so much. Yeah, and if you're going to Darwin, like it is thebomb.com. Like I got to drill bones. I got to put back like reduce fractures. I got to do so much stuff. So like it is the place to be. Like metro, like he said, you can maybe take x-ray forms down to the x-ray place or something like that, but like fully in rural, they really want you to stay. They want you to like what you're doing, and they'll really give you a lot of responsibility pretty like quick from the gate. So yeah, just go to Darwin or anywhere rural, honestly. Like Warrnambool's been amazing as well. Everyone's so kind, such a great community. And I particularly like it because being international, I have no family that is based here. So I feel like they have really become my family, which is really nice.
Yeah, thanks for all the insight on that. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm conscious of time here. We just have about 2 minutes left. So I know there's more questions here and we haven't gotten to all of them. Please do head back, ask these in Kuroko and to us. I don't know about everyone here. I know, Emma, you're pretty active on Instagram, on social media. We're happy to share that. I don't know if anyone else is as well, but we're always more than happy to connect you with more guidance, such as what you've received tonight. Before we head off, just from each of you, I'd love to hear just kind of a final comment. Is there anything, a little tip or advice or favorite story, be it short, because we've only got 2 minutes, that you'd like to share? Starting with whoever speaks first.
I was going to say, I'll keep it really short. Last 2 years, I was able to go home for Christmas this year, the 2 years previously, not because of COVID. So my friends took me on a hike, Mount Kosciuszko. It's the highest point in Australia. It's like a hill compared to the Rockies, but it's very cute. And there was snow. There was actually snow in January in Australia up at the top of this mountain. And they specifically took me off trail so I could go stomp in snow and throw a snowball and like make a little snowman. So that's probably one of my favorite outside of school Aussie experiences. You can find snow if you go hunting for it.
Yeah, I'll say you're doing this to be a good doctor. So like everything that's been said, work hard to be a great person, an eager learner, and apply yourself to help people, which is what you're trying to do, whether that's in Australia or Canada. Australia is a fantastic place to train. You will love working in Australia. You will also love working in Canada. The main thing is just try and really be eager to learn and to serve the people that you're going to have the privilege of working under and working for.
Before we jump on to the next one, just because we're on you, Nathan, I don't know if everyone here caught this, but Nathan just completed his Royal College exams in Canada like last night, and here he is. And so I just feel like he deserves a little, round of applause. I mean, great accomplishments all around, but that's a big thing and a lot of work behind that. So congrats, Nathan.
Thank you.
Okay, now on to whoever would like to go next.
Going to Australia was easily the best decision I've ever made. I live so close to the beach. This is like vacationing and working at the same time. It's the absolute best. I'm so glad I did it. I don't know how else to explain it. It was an excellent choice on my behalf. Yeah, and it's a really big decision, but if you take a very level-headed approach with it and find whatever answer is the right one for you, I'm sure you won't go wrong with it.
I guess I'll round it off. I'm exactly like Nick said, I'm actually so happy that life did not work out the way I thought it would. Coming to Australia is definitely the best thing for me. And then in terms of medicine, whether it be in Canada, Australia, anywhere else, just apply yourself, throw yourself into the deep end, it's going to feel scary, but it's so much easier to just mess up and have to like reset your mind than just go in and not think that you're going to try. Because you're going to get so much out of it if you're just willing to give it a shot.
Amazing. Thank you so much to the four of you for taking the time to be here, for sharing all of this. And this was recorded, so we'll be sharing this so you can revisit all of these amazing tidbits of information and advice. Thanks for everyone for joining in on your Wednesday night. And yeah, enjoy your evenings and mornings in Australia. And just thank you so much. Again, that was really fantastic. One more point to everyone who's still here. We've still got an hour left, so head back. All the universities, UQ and Deakin and Macquarie, and all the rest of them are here over in Curacao. So head on over. All right. Good night, all.
Thanks, Anna. Mitchell, you can get my email from Anna if you want to talk more about nursing stuff.
Oh, I'll connect with you, Nathan, if that comes through. All right, I'm gonna press end on this. I see a few comments, but off we go. Good night, thanks.